Well, it's a delight to be back again, and I must say this is, I've never been on demand before. I'm quite excited about that. I was actually quite happy that George agreed to let me come and talk to you about Turner. I've had the opportunity of seeing the largest, most spectacular exhibition of Turner's works, oils and watercolors, that have ever been exhibited in the United States. And that exhibition you can still see if you have time and a plane to go to New York City. It is the big retrospective on Turner is now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I got to see it at the Washington's National Gallery. It then went to Dallas. And it is worth any trip you can make to New York. You, of course, along with these exhibitions, they're so monumental, they're so expensive. You'll never see one like this again. And it is has over almost, I think, 180 works by Turner. Large oil paintings, small watercolors, including many of the images I'll be showing you today, because a lot of these images I took out of the catalog. Also, I just want to mention very briefly that it's a pleasure to be back here and see all these wonderful landscapes. I always forget, you know, how many fantastic landscapes you have, and I was not aware of your watercolor gallery, and it's really spectacular. Though we'll see that Turner will outdo any of those people, but everyone, Turner outdoes everyone. What can I say? All righty. Just to let you know what you're looking at here very briefly, this is a watercolor. The large watercolor is one of his color beginnings, as he would call them, and I'll show you many others of those. And then the center work is actually very small because it was published in an album, is of the Cliffs of Dover, which is what the color beginning is. And you can see it's much more detailed. And this is how Turner operated. He goes from these large, kind of chaotic color beginnings and then creates these small, very intricate and extraordinary images that seem indeed as if by magic. Well, here we're looking at three images of Turner, two that are very famous. One is his self-portrait in watercolor way on the left there, on your left. That's from 1799. And then perhaps everyone's favorite caricature of Turner. This is Turner later in life in the 1840s, seemingly painting with a mop, and on there is a bucket of yellow, and what he is doing, he seems to be what is called varnishing days, finishing his work of art. But everyone thought, in a sense, that he painted, as it were, like a mop, with a mop. And we'll see that it is really in watercolor that this begins. We also see that through his techniques, he was extraordinarily innovative. He took different techniques that lots of people had used, but it's Turner who pulls them all together, and pulls them all together early in his career, that is in the 1790s, and of course he goes on to paint through the 1840s, dying in 1851. The middle image is another portrait. This is actually done from 1816 by a very famous writer of the day, C.R. Leslie, who knew Turner well. And it's, of course, much more realistic in some ways, much more what Turner probably looked like than that beautiful, idealistic, gorgeous face staring at us in the watercolor. Turner was very short, very gruff in appearance, and he was a Cockney through and through. And therefore, that kind of character is very much conveyed in the images others did of him, where, as you can see in this fantastic watercolor by himself, by Turner, we have this very beautiful face, young man looking out at us. Now, this watercolor self-portrait, I think, is significant for several reasons. First of all, it is a classic romantic self-portrait. And what I mean by that is that its full frontal face, the figure stares out at us, both eyes looking very intently, and of course bathed in this light, and seemingly coming out of darkness, seemingly as it were appearing before us out of nowhere. And this was very much the romantic sensibility, the artist as being able to see the world very clearly, very precisely, starting with nature, yet at the same time having a kind of imaginative vision that transforms everything. And I think also it's fitting how much light is really conveyed here, because as many would say during Turner's lifetime, it seemed as if he was creating objects, not creating objects when he painted objects. He didn't really paint objects. What he did is he painted the light and kind of made objects rise out of the light around them. And we'll see how that works very much today. This watercolor is also significant in that it is done in the year that he was elected to the most prestigious academy in England, that is the Royal Academy. He was elected as associate member in 1799, again, as a fairly young man. And it also shows, of course, his incredible self-confidence as he was doing this. What I'd like to start with is, and I'm not going to give you a chronological overview of his work. Instead, we're going to look at different works to see techniques as well as how they relate to his oil paintings, Turner's oil paintings. What I want to start with is actually the watercolor that famously evoked, as it were, an eyewitness account of how Turner painted. And it is, of course, from that account that I got the title for this talk, that is, As If by Magic. This is a watercolor from 1818. It's called A First Rate Taking in Stores, and of course the first rate is referring to the man o' war that we see there, largely looming over the rest of the scene. One thing I want you to keep in mind as we look at a lot of these images is that they are much, much smaller than we're seeing them. Many of these watercolors are only 6 by 8 inches. Some of them, like this one, is only 11 by 12. And look at the extraordinary detail that you can see here. It really is impressive. Well, this was painted for his key patron, Walter Fox. And Walter Fox would, in fact, lead to several exhibitions that Turner would have in Walter Fox's own place, Grosvenor Place. And in fact, this was one of 60 watercolors that were exhibited in 1819 in Grosvenor Place. So very, very important watercolor, as we will see. And the story goes that this key patron asked one morning, while Turner was staying there, to have, and after he had some breakfast, that why doesn't he paint a man of war for him? He wants to see how well he can draw a man of war. And remember, this is not with archival material in front of him, you know, lots of images to draw upon. This is from Turner's knowledge and memory. And he apparently, and there's no reason to question this because he did this frequently, it seems, notice he began by pouring wet paint onto the paper. And of course, watercolor is a very fugitive medium. It's something that you have to be very attuned to its immediate effects. You can't make mistakes, rarely. It's not like oil paint where you can paint the whole thing over. You can't do that. Usually if you make a lot of mistakes, you just got to throw it away and start over. Well, in this case, he saturates the paper. And he was very much known for this wet and wet technique that he would do. And then notice what it says. He tore, he scratched, he scrubbed at it in a kind of frenzy, as it were. And the whole thing was chaos. But gradually, as if by magic, the lovely ship, with all of its exquisite minutiae, came into being. And by luncheon time, began at breakfast, by luncheon time, the drawing was taken down in triumph. And indeed, this is what was then produced and then exhibited. Rather kind of breathtaking, to say the least. Sorry. Now I'm going to be showing you this image several times in this discussion here to use it, as I said, not only to see this process, but also to show how early Turner and late Turner can all be seen as kind of culminating in this image. That is, that this image brings us backwards and forwards in his career and tells us a lot about Turner's abilities and interests. Down below the image, I have a watercolor that was done of this Grosvenor Place that Walter Fox owned, where you can see, amid, not unlike sometimes the Madison Gallery with couches, etc., you have works all the way, salon style, all the way around the walls. Next to it is one of Turner's very famous early watercolors. And, of course, an image that he is more known for, and that is sublime wilderness. this idea of the grandeur of nature, the power of nature that overwhelms man, overtakes man, and gives him a sense of awe before the greatness, the majesty of creation itself. And this is this wonderful watercolor I've had the opportunity to teach many a time, called The Fall of the Reichenbach in the Valley of Obersal in Switzerland. Now, Turner did a number of alpine views for Walter Fox, as well as for others who wanted to buy this. And this work was exhibited several times. It was exhibited first in Turner's own gallery. He, again, you know, you had to be enterprising artist. He had his own gallery in 1804. People would come and see, and he got a lot of response, actually orders, literally, to make things like what he had done before. It then, and this is very significant, was shown at the Royal Academy in 1815. Now, the reason why I say that's significant is in the 19th century and 18th centuries, it was new to do what you call an exhibition watercolor exhibition. That is, it was something that was, you would frame watercolors, you would hang them up. They weren't just studies, they weren't just topographical views that might illustrate tourist guides. They actually were seen as equal to oil painting, or at least near the value of oil painting. And Turner is one of the key figures in achieving that shift, in achieving that goal. He also, as is evident in these two images, was able to take landscape, which is at the bottom of the genres, so to speak, in the Royal Academy. Landscape often got stuck way up in the ceilings where no one could see it, and in corners. He took landscape and he gave it a historical importance. He made it equal to the highest genre, which was history painting. That included mythology, religious images, as well as actual historical events. So this aspect is visible in both of these, as we will see. Now, this alpine watercolor then also was shown in Grosvenor Place near, in the same grouping of 60 watercolors that our Man of War was in. Now, these are painted 14 years apart. This was done in 1804, as I said, or that's the date we give because that's when it was exhibited. But as you perhaps can gather, in each case we have the combination of incredible detail with an expansiveness of the power of nature being conveyed through an incredible affinity and sense of subtlety of the powers of weather and how weather changes and the elements themselves. Of course, here Turner is working majorly with the sea and the sky, and then he has this man-made structure that is also as awe-inspiring as nature. Here, of course, it is nature itself that is awe-inspiring. And what is interesting to me is that Turner began as an architect's kind of intern, as it were, doing architectural drawings. He then went into scenic design. So the idea of illusion, the idea of these grand structures having to be painted, he learned very early. And when I say early, I mean the young boy started drawing when he was 8. He was working in an architect's office around 12 to 14. So this is someone who had his hand and eye trained very carefully very early on. So in each case, we have a sense, again, as what was famously called the sublime, this grandeur of nature. But also what we have in both of these watercolors are innovative techniques. And these are two details of these images. And here are some of the innovative techniques you can find here. First of all, you can find Turner actually scratching out the paint, rubbing the paint. Apparently, his favorite blotting tool was dried breadcrumbs. Maybe he took a little bite while he was eating too, working. And he may not have painted with a mop, but he would paint with his fingers. If he was outside and rain was coming down, he'd let those raindrops be part of the image. And he also did something very significant called stopping out. Stopping out. And stopping out is literally creating, doing a type of varnish. And if you look very carefully, you'll see a beam of white light, the rays of light that are going through this mist and the fall of the waterfall. And that, as well as parts of this waterfall, were done by stopping out. That is, prevented the other colors and washes to color the white paper. This is not painted with white paint. This is what's so extraordinary. This is done by preserving the white paper. And every great watercolorist aims to do this, because this is the true kind of skill of the medium. How can you use the white of the paper rather than resorting to white paint like you do in oil painting? That is not to say he never used what is called body color or gouache white to add. He will, and I'll show you examples of that, but that is not visible here. So I think that is just amazing looking at this spectacular watercolor. And what we see in each is his attentiveness. Again, remember that these are small. Now the Reichenbach's is a little bigger. I think it's maybe 10 by 20 or 30. But the other one, remember, is 11 by 15. And we come up close, and we see that he knows how to use key details and figures so that we get a sense of scale. So remember, this is only a tiny little part of this 11 by 15 watercolor, now blown up. Notice what he gives us. Figures popping their heads out above the cannons. Figures up there. Look at the detailing of the mast. He even gives us the British flag, notice, up there. And can anyone find the figures in the detail here? Anyone see that? He gives us some interesting figures. Right here we got some sheep, and look way up there. There are 2, 3 little figures, tiny figures, so that what? We are overwhelmed by the size and grandeur of nature. Here they are again. Just so, let me go one more back. Here they are, and here are the shepherds there, and then some sheep also along here, goat. But notice how nature's size, and as well as nature's ferocity, indicated by the fallen trees, and of course this powerful waterfall suggests our, as it were, humility in the face of God's creations. Now, Turner was not religious. He very much was famously known to have said at his deathbed that the sun is God, again suggesting the importance of light and the power of light in his art. But he certainly follows the romantic sensibility of nature as God and nature's power as evidence of a higher power's power and creative ability and magnificence. Again, you can see, too, in both of these, how he's able to get the architectural structure, whether it's of the boat or of the rocks, treating nature almost like an architectural element. And that brings us back to his earlier images. This is from one of his first tours. Turner, like many romantic landscape painters, would make the tours throughout England, Wales, Scotland. He finally got to Italy, France, and in fact did numerous guidebooks. I will show you again some watercolors that are for that. Again, watercolors that are 6 by 8 inches that have enormous detail. This is the chancel and the crossing of Tintern Abbey, looking towards the east window. This was exhibited in the Royal Academy, again to a major exhibition in 1794. This extraordinarily detailed watercolor of the architecture of Tintern Abbey is only 14 by 10 inches. I don't know about you, but I'm humbled and totally impressed. I will show you some details here, but you can see again how he gets all the structure, taking again, just working from paper and color and creating a very convincing perspective, once again giving us figures, gentlemen figures here as if they're touring. Many people went to visit Tintern Abbey at this time, and some of you may even know the famous lines that were penned 4 years later by William Wordsworth, which were the lines above Tintern Abbey, actually miles away, but very much evoking the place. And so again, to show you that the kind of precision and knowledge, and again, these weren't done on the spot, okay? Something like this was based on pencil sketches, sometimes very detailed, sometimes less, and then he goes back and paints in the studio. So his memory, his visual memory, his knowledge of certain structures is as important as what he might have engaged with, in terms of right then and there. Now, Tintern Abbey would be something that Turner would turn to many times to paint. It was, of course, one of the most popular places to do, and this is a product of his first trip to Wales at the age of 17. And again, I think both of this reminds us of this training as a scenic designer, too, and this desire to create an illusion. Well, this precision, this sense of illusion of buildings and space and nature does not end when he gets older. Okay? When we look at some of his very abstract watercolors from the same time as this one, I don't want to hear people saying, oh, it's because his eyes were old. Right? There's always the optician who writes the article that's in the art journal for some reason and talks about, El Greco painted the way he did because he had astigmatism. Turner painted this way, or Degas did, because they were going blind. In Turner's case, that is not true. This is from 1840. This watercolor of Rouen Cathedral, and imagine Monet seeing this. Monet was very much influenced by Turner. Monet seeing this, and he would have because it was published in a wonderful Turner's annual tour book of the Seine. This is from 1832, actually, published in 1834. This watercolor, the full one you're seeing on the top left, is 5 by 7 inches. And as you can see, even getting up close of a detail, it's still extraordinary how he got in all the tracery, the windows. And then look at all the people he gives us. He gives us this vast mass of people, again, to suggest that this is an important historical religious spot. He obviously has made some wonderful shifts. He used many drawings that he did from the 1820s to then put this watercolor together. And with that, he then was able to exaggerate the perspective so that we get both almost the full height as well as the width of the building, something he couldn't get, let's say, from particularly standing at that place. Now this uses body color. Okay, the white here, particularly in here, maybe you can see it in this detail along here, this is all added with white paint, something like this. Yet at the same time, he is making use of the white paper in the sky, for example. That is not probably very little white paint there. The bottom left work is from 1838. And actually, Rouen Cathedral, I think, is 1842. I made a mistake in my notes here because I know it was a late work. That's why I picked it, 1842. The bottom work is 1830s now, 1838. And this is Merton College in Oxford. And this was in picturesque views in England and Wales. And here, this work, much larger in comparison, 11 by 17, involves scraping out. Again, he would often scrape out parts of his thing and literally take a little knife, as it were, and scrape out to get some of the white evidence in here, for example. And once again, we see a wonderful way that Turner makes it a kind of history picture, in that here's this grand old building that, in fact, was being, as you can see, laborers working on it. They were resurfacing it. So he captures that event. And he catches the weary milkmaid coming through and the academics and creates a wonderful contrast between the female and the males, between this lowly individual and these high academics. And then my favorite thing is the white and black dog, kind of merging against and meeting each other, as it were, playing off this contrast of white and black, light and dark, which is what makes this watercolor ultimately. Here again is, once again, our detail of the first rake taken in stores, again, 1818. And this with a watercolor from 1799. And this is a watercolor that suggests that early on, he really understood the fugitive nature of weather and the mutability of nature and how to convey that, how to convey atmosphere, how to convey a change, whether in light or water coming down or a shift in the clouds. This is, excuse me, this is Dolbarton and the Pass of Llanberis. I think that's also in Wales. And it's much larger, to suggest again that he did do large watercolors. This is 21 by 29 inches, so it's actually larger than that one. You can see here much more kind of sketchy. And indeed, this was probably used for another watercolor or even oil paintings that would have been done of this area. Particularly the way the edges are and stuff suggests that indeed that was the case. But you can see again, he's working. Here we have again that stopping out using the varnish to allow for the white paper. This is Warkworth Castle in Northumberland. Thunderstorm approaching at sunset. Again, that's his title. And, of course, this notion, as I said, of the subtlety of nature. As you look at this watercolor from 1799, and it's a good-sized watercolor, it's 20 by 29 inches, you may be struck by, well, this thunderstorm, where is that approaching, and how is he doing this, and why is there this mist? Well, the fact that often light and mist kind of, as it were, appear as a thunderstorm would come from behind. And, of course, he's suggesting, indeed, this magnificent image of history, of the history of Great Britain, as it were, hovering over, gone through many, many years, centuries even, of decay, and then nature, which is always present, always making changes. Notice, too, he plays that off a building that suggests much more recent time, the same thing with the steeple. So he gives us a whole kind of history, as it were, in the architecture of England, at the same time, the history of a natural moment. The way here we have individuals who are still fishing, yet the storm is coming on, and we can just imagine what the next scene would be if he painted next, perhaps violent rain coming down. Now, what I have here are some lines of poetry. And this, again, suggests how seriously Turner took his watercolors, that he would, when he exhibited them, have catalogs, of course they always had exhibition catalogs, that would have lines of poetry. And he famously did it for his oils. He, in fact, wrote his own poems. One was The Fallacies of Hope, again, suggesting very much his pessimistic worldview. But this one was based on one of the great 18th century poets that many of the Romantics loved to evoke, and that is James Thomson and his Seasons. And here he is taking from that, and notice why choosing these lines, he's really trying to emphasize this brooding darkness, and that the sense of tranquility could change at any moment. And, of course, how nature controls all, again, this kind of fatalism that he has. And I love this. Unusual darkness broods, and growing gains the full procession of the sky. And then ending with a reddening gloom, a magazine of fate ferment. Here's a detail, so you can see, again, enormous, fantastic technique on this. Again, both detailing as well as how he would have done some scraping here, perhaps some stopping out here. This uses no body color, so it, again, is all using the white. Now, the bottom image here is probably the image that, if you are familiar with Turner's work and his late work, this is probably something that you may have had in mind. In fact, you may be surprised how detailed his early work is. This is Turner's watercolor from 1845 on the bottom, 9 by 13 inches, called The Whale. Above is a watercolor seemingly as amorphous, as suggestive, as abstract, but from 1798. Again, to suggest that, I keep on saying Whistler, Turner does not just become abstract at the end, that he begins in a sense of abstraction, again, working with the artist's basic elements of color and light, and of course the material even of the paper being very important as well. This is Evening Landscape with Castle and Bridge. Again, that is 7 by 10 inches on the top, and the whale 9 by 13. Now, what is so, I think, significant about these much more abstract images is that not only does he challenge us, but he encourages us to use our own imagination. And I would argue that one of the elements of Romanticism, which becomes the foundation of 20th century modernism, is in fact the engagement of the spectator, making demands on the spectator. Demands that can be, of course, as rigorous as a whole Mark Rothko chapel or a small watercolor by Turner. And you'll also see that frequently there are pencil lines as well. Now, this was something that was not exhibited during his time. It was kind of discovered. These are discovered. Many of these were in sketchbooks that he had, but he considered them still worthy to contemplate and use. When they were discovered, someone wrote, "Oh, we had never known Turner before," that this incredible abstraction had opened their eyes. But as you can see, works that he had shown to others were already as abstract. Here is a sheet with 2 images on the left by Turner, Evening Landscape with Castle and Bridge, Boat at Sea, and then Trees in Strong Breeze from 1820-25, again on the far left there. What I have next to that is a 20th century watercolorist, very famously known for his expressionistic watercolors, and that is the German Emil Nolde. And this is his seascape from the 1930s. And again, to suggest where Turner leads to. That, again, when you look at these things and then you look at Turner, you realize Turner was there first. Again, the incredible imagination and innovation of this artist. Again, to suggest things with just some mere splashes of color, but yet very convincingly. You can really feel that tree moving in the breeze. You can really feel the heaviness of those clouds coming down on the cliff. And again, these are his color beginnings, as he would call them. Well, let me show you one of these color beginnings. This one much more detailed, and then the final watercolor it comes to. I'll show you a series of these so you can see where these abstractions ultimately lead to. We have Norham Castle, a study from 1798 on the upper left, and on the right, the final work, Norham Castle Sunrise, 1798. The final watercolor was exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1799, and it's 20 by 28 inches. So again, a very good size, as large as some oil paintings are. And here we see him giving us the castle, elements of the boat, etc. Of course, he did many others of these as well, but you can see how then he does a separate one and draws out the details, adds details, and decides to really play on that light. And this leads actually to a late oil painting, which is all yellow. And again, almost based on really memories, not painting there, again, in situ, but going back to his studio to do this. And once again, lines that he had appended when he exhibited this of the rising sun as the powerful king of day rejoicing the east. Or another example of this color beginning and the final work. This is the Bass Rock from 1823-24, the final work at the top, again shown extremely large. This watercolor is once again only 6 by 10 inches. In reality, it appeared in his Provincial Antiquities and Picturesque Scenery of Scotland. Again, these wonderful, successful tour books that he published. And then below, from about 1822-23, the color beginning of this. And he did several of these, really working on the light. You can imagine him doing this. Now, there is some evidence that he didn't even do these on spot, in situ. Sometimes he would just do pencil drawings and then go back to his studio with his visual memory, his sense of imagination, and then work on these color beginnings. So just because you see a color beginning doesn't mean it was done there right on the spot. Many of them, most famously the ones he did for the burning of the Houses of Parliament, have now been deemed to be done when he went back to the studio because of all these people, and how could you do that really? Again, once again, how he gives us the power of nature, nature's sublime force in the lightning. Again, how he creates that. In this case, I believe he used some stopping out, again, to get the waves too, and these figures that seem to be drowning. Again, this power of nature's. Again, imagine this 6 by 10 inches. Imagine doing this in 6 by 10 inches. That's what I can never figure out. Turner's Shields on the River Tyne from 1823, same time period, but a different book, The Rivers of England. This is even smaller, though we see it quite blown up. This is only 6 by 8 inches. So again, very tiny like that Rouen. Look at the detailing of the figures and the moonlight. And this is one of his color beginnings. Here, moonlight coming out, and we know it's for this area because it says study for shields for this area. And this is 10 by 12, so it's larger than the final work, which is, I think, very interesting. And it, again, shows Turner's mastery of different effects of light. What I love about this watercolor is that he gives us two ways that light can be created: nature and man's instigation, right? Here we have a fire that's been lit by the laborers. They're all gathered around, so we have this firelight versus the cool moonlight that plays down, and brilliantly playing off these two worlds with this simple watercolor, not simple, but this intricate watercolor. Now, Turner would travel throughout England and Scotland and Wales, as well as Europe, to paint certain famous sites. And there's probably no site that has more history, more mystery than Stonehenge. And what we're looking at here is one of his small watercolors, 6 by 8 inches, of Stonehenge at sunset from 1811-12, in which, if you've been there, he gets a good sense of how these are done, but also that there are pathways. Even back then there were, and of course giving us a small, tiny figure. But again, you can imagine him doing this rather quickly. Again, doing wet and wet, starting with chaos, as it were, and drawing out then these forms. But what is interesting is, again, how a much more finished watercolor brings up the historical meaning, the kind of moralistic strength that art needed to have in the 19th century. And that is this amazing watercolor from 1828. Again, a small watercolor from one of his books. And here we have quite a scene. Can anyone tell what has happened here? It's actually quite gruesome once you figure it out. See the guy, the shepherd, and the sheep? What's happened? They've been struck dead by lightning. So if you didn't believe nature was God, now you do, because his power, of course, here. He also altered very much the Stonehenge. It is not accurate. He changed it so he would have this wonderful block here. It's almost like we have the Ten Commandments being held, right? And the lightning coming down, and then things. I love this. You got the straight one, and then this one's falling down right behind it, and really suggests almost a process as if this whole thing is going to collapse before our eyes, not just the living things around it. This use of history and details to evoke, again, thoughts in his viewers' minds, thoughts that relate to the history of the time, or the history of civilization, or England's place in the world. We see in some of his more elaborate landscape watercolors. This is, again, an early one, 1796, exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1815. It's probably the largest one we've seen yet. It's 27 by 40 inches, so this is a good-sized watercolor. This is called The Battle of Fort Rock, Val d'Huest in Piedmont, again, 1796, and it uses many of the key techniques: scraping, body color, and stopping out, which we probably did in here and parts in here and down here. Here he also probably did some scraping, actually, to get that water coming down. Now what we are seeing, again, fortunately this one is a little larger, as it were. Does this work? And that is a battle. Look at all these tiny figures that are kind of, as it were, on the edge and this giant rock hovering over them. Someone who is wounded with, interestingly enough, a woman and child. And please note the colors. Remember, we are dealing with an English artist, but red, white, and blue. And this is something American artists will do, too. It's nice that our flags have the same colors. And notice, too, that you have this kind of natural, as it were, crossing, a natural cross, but also a kind of, as it were, shelter suggested by nature's destruction. And imagine him doing this and what he would want his viewers in the Royal Academy to think about. Remember when he exhibits this? He paints it in 1796. He exhibits it in 1815. What does he want his viewers to think about? Anyone have an idea? Your history? Waterloo, thank you. Napoleon, yes. And Napoleon's domination of Europe and this continent, this world that's literally split in half, literally divided asunder. And he gives us to us in this very powerful image. And again, suggesting the future with that child, having that mother and child, very, very significant image. Some of his alpine watercolors are certainly his most spectacular and give us a sense of true sublimity. It is these type of watercolors that influence American painters like Thomas Moran, Frederick Church. We have the St. Gothard Pass on the left from 1804, and then fantastic watercolor from 1810, the upper falls of the Reichenbach Rainbow. And this small watercolor, 10 by 15, uses body color and stopping out. And notice he does give us this rainbow, but look at this here. Here he has stopped this out so that then it would stay white paper. Here stayed white paper, probably added white here and here for the body color so it comes out. And, of course, this incredible sense of geology. It is no wonder that Turner would become the kind of ultimate figure for Ruskin to look at and to praise for someone who has a sense of truth to nature, who creates what Ruskin would name a whole chapter of his book, Modern Painters, multi-volume, which all revolves around Turner as the greatest artist ever, of mountain beauty. And here we see it, of course, mountain beauty as rough and rugged, as well as often painting mountain beauty as very calm. In fact, this watercolor was done for John Ruskin. And here we have, again, an example going back to the beginning of the 1800s, and now a watercolor produced in 1843, his last decade of painting. This is the Pass of St. Gothard again, near Fado. This is watercolor that's only 11 by 18 inches with a scratching out and pen. And this was one of 25 watercolors he painted from 1842 to 45 when he went through Germany and Switzerland. They were, as I said, commissioned by John Ruskin. He asked for 7 of them, and they would hang in John Ruskin's home. Here we have, again, all these wonderful geological surfaces, but also you actually see these surfaces being created, don't you, by the power of the waves, the power of the clouds and the rain that would come down, the sense that we are watching nature in action, constantly in a state of becoming, something the Romantics very much embraced. They were not for the notion of a kind of staid being as the more idealistic Renaissance, even Baroque artists were, but the sense of a constant state of something becoming before our eyes, being created. And for me, probably the most extraordinary of these Ruskin watercolors is this one, Goldau, that's 12 by 18 inches from 1843. And look at this sky. And here we can see literally the scratching out that he does after he painted it. Well, it's wet and wet techniques. But also, again, making a landscape more than just a scene. Making a landscape something that we can, in fact, chew on, as it were, and think about our own destiny. This blood-red sky, which for Ruskin and others was very much a sign of destruction, a sign, again, of nature's powers, of the fate of the universe, the fate of humanity, and these strange figures who seem to be lounging, bathing, as it were, on the rocks, but only for a moment do they seem, in fact, secure, that there is a sense that this whole thing is going to erupt and alter. Ruskin, when he visited the spot of these paintings, compared Turner's colossal conception with what he saw. And he said that the mountains looked pygmy and poor in comparison to what Turner had done, because Turner could, again, create a sense of space. And this one he called, on the whole, the mightiest drawing of his final time. The scarlet of the colors was Turner's symbol of destruction. Now, when I said that something to chew upon, one thing that viewers would know at that time is what happened in this very spot in September of 1806. Because in September of 1806, in this very town of Guldau, there were huge sections of rock that split, and mud came down and created a crushing landslide, killing 450 people. And so this sense, again, of the fragility of human life in the face of nature's consistency and power. Just have a few more images I want to show you. I want to show you some oil paintings so you can see how his techniques he used in watercolor become oil paintings. So here I'm showing you 5 oil paintings from a range of time. On the top is Calais Sands, Low Water, exhibited in the Royal Academy in 1830. Next to that, on the right at the top, is what Turner's famously known for as well, his views of Venice. This is Approach to Venice from 1843. And I think in both of these you can see how similar they seem to his watercolor technique. Again, beginning in watercolors, doing innovation in watercolors, then applying it to oil later. Here we have one of his masterworks that was owned by an American, influenced people like Frederick Edmund Church and Thomas Moran. This is his Staffa Fingal's Cave from 1832, which has all kind of poetic, literary notions. But notice there's that sun floating, that like an eye of God over the scene, that also suggests the whole cycle of nature and history as it flows up and down again. And then an amazing oil painting, Rough Sea, from the 1840s, looks literally like a watercolor in many ways. And then a work that's been titled by dealers during Turner's time probably, called Sunset with Sea Monsters. Actually, they're 2 large fish, but they look an awful lot like a giant sea monster coming out. But again, how there was just all this evocativeness. And when people saw these paintings, they said that they are literally nothing in labor, but extraordinary in art. Again, as if they were produced just by magic. Finally, I want to end with Turner and his legacy, just showing you one artist who obviously learned a lot from Turner, who I think most carried on Turner's sensibility of abstraction and what color can do, how it can be evocative, and how a medium that is often seen as unimportant compared to oil painting can be, in fact, the perfect medium to use. And that is Turner, we're looking at on the left and on the right. Does anyone know who we're looking at here? No, it's an American artist who winds up living in England his entire life after 1855. Whistler, yes. This is James, who almost shares his name, James McNeill Whistler. And here we have Whistler's pastels that he exhibited as one exhibit. Not with oil paintings. This is all he did at Venice. This was his exhibition. In fact, critics mocked it as pass-a-weight. You know, it seems like there was nothing there. But in the 1880s, we have 2 scenes of Venice in pastel. Here's Whistler's famous butterfly emblem Okay, that's how you can tell it's a Whistler right away. He doesn't sign it. He creates this little butterfly that goes on. That's as part of the design. And here are these watercolors by Turner that were done in the 1840s. And you can see that indeed Whistler learned an amazing amount from Turner. And my final kind of suggestion of this is Turner's Venice, a gondola in a storm from 1843, again showing the mastery of his stroke, of his hand to suggest so much with so little, and Whistler's famous nocturnes, the Nocturne in Blue and Silver, the Lagoon Venice from about 1880. Whistler was said to have wanted to create color as if it appeared as if it's been breathed onto glass, so that there's no strokes. And of course, we saw with Whistler, always, he starts with strokes, he starts with chaos, and then, as if by magic, he creates these incredible scenes. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yeah? Okay, again, I thought I explained. I'm sorry if I went too quickly. Stopping out is a type of varnish. So what you do is you create a varnish and you paint, you literally put it on the areas of the paper that you don't want the water to catch. And so it kind of, has it so it doesn't set in. It protects it. And then you can, I guess, somehow it probably only lasts so long or whatever, but then you can go back, or you just use that white and paint around it. So it allows you to preserve the white while you're doing large, let's say, violent, even expressive gestures to keep the white there. Any other? Exactly. It's like that. Yeah, that's where it begins. Yeah. He also, before I forget, he also used a type of varnish to deepen his colors. He would put on and make the colors darker. So he gives us both darker and then this incredible white. Yes? Do you have a favorite work of time? I don't like him at all. Can you tell? It's very interesting. Turner was one of the first artists I started reading about when I was 12, when I started art history. And I've always had this passionate love for him. And I began always, interesting enough, with a kind of modernist eye. And then I've gone back into the 19th century. I actually was very much into abstract expressionism. And I think that's what's so attracted to me. The late watercolors I find extraordinary. But every time, when I went to that show, no one was around me, but you can imagine the oohing and ahhing I was doing and going, oh my God, holding my head, just can't believe he actually was able to do these. And how powerful they still are, even today. Yes, sir?
Can you recommend any books on the technical side of Turner?
That's a very good question. There is actually not much I know of on that in terms of books. Now, there isn't articles. There might be some articles. So if you Google some articles, I know there's one on the choice of papers he did. And the place to look for this, for these small articles, is there's a whole journal just devoted to Turner. And I know the UGA library, for example, has it. And anybody can go in there and look at them there. And there are a number of articles. So if you, again, just put under article Turner techniques or Turner paper, some articles will come up, and that way you could be able to read them. And some of them are even available to come up literally on the computer screen, and you could print them out because we have this thing called JSTOR now. Things are so much easier than when I was young. What?
So University of Georgia on the internet?
Yes. Or just go to the cataloging and on the computer, put in Turner Journal, and it'll show you where the journals are, and go and just pull some out, and you'll see all kind of interesting articles on him. Okay. Thank you.
Keep in mind that all these watercolors are available at the Madison Gallery.
That would be my honorarium.